He's going to speak about, the title of his talk is called Growing Fears, Mixed Experiences, Weak Hopes, the Fight Against Antisemitism is Still Necessary. Professor Weisskirchen is the personal representative of the chair in office of the OSCE in combating anti-Semitism, and he's the spokesperson on foreign affairs for the SPD group within the OSCE. Currently, he's a personal representative for combating anti-Semitism in the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OECD, and he held this position since 2005. He's a member of the German Federal Parliament, the Bundestag, and he has been so since 1976. He's currently the spokesperson for the SPD parliamentary group with the Bundestag Committee on Culture and Media Affairs, and he's held this position since 1999. And he's the chairman of the German-Russian parliamentarian group in the Bundestag. Since 1992, he's been a member of the Helsinki Citizen Assembly, a controlling body of peace and civil rights movements based in sort of movement that came from Havel. In 1992, he became a member of the acting federal administration of the German Czech and the German Slovak Society. And since 1976, he's been a member of the German Bundestag Committee on Foreign Affairs. I first met Professor Weisskirchen at the Herzliya conference, and I met him actually in this very special meeting. It was the best practices meeting that was held in the Bundestag for the OSCE on combating anti-Semitism. He also has co-edited books. The most recent is a special meeting on anti-Semitism in conjunction with the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly meeting. So he is a scholar, I think an active politician, especially on issues of human rights, and somebody who's been very active in leading on issues of anti-Semitism in the current context. So it's an honor that you're here, and I welcome you.
Thank you, Charles. And I'm honored not only that you invited me, but as far as I saw, I'm the only German that you invited.
No.
No, there's
a few more.
Okay, there are more Germans then. But I would like to put this point at first. I was born in the last months of the Second World War and grew up in a Germany what has delivered the most terrible assault ever on human beings, the Holocaust. And this Holocaust, this is till the end of times engraved in the name of my country. Hitler did it. Since then, the politicians, we Germans, we should be obliged to fight against anti-Semitism when it begins, from the very first moment on. That's a kind of a moral responsibility, but more than that, political obligation. So this is the reason I do think why I'm standing here in front of you. And the OSCE is one of the tools, one of the political tools that you can put in place if necessary. But you have to understand that the OSCE is not a legally binding organization, but only a kind of a politically binding organization. 56 member states, from Canada, United States of America, to the end of Russia, Vladivostok. 56 member states. And this organization is only one instrument that you can use in the fight against anti-Semitism. There are several other tools, but if you try to use the tools of the OSCE, then again you should know there is no army, no police in order to implement the decisions and the commitments that the member states have accepted, but only a kind of moral expectations. And this is then my work, to try to look into the different member states. What are they doing in order to implement these commitments that they have accepted? And in the fight against anti-Semitism, roughly 50 commitments were and have been accepted by the member states. And if you look into the segments of these commitments, ranging from, for instance, Holocaust education, Holocaust Remembrance Day, to legislation. What kind of understanding do we have in the whole OSCE region? What is really anti-Semitism? We have worked out a working definition to understand what anti-Semitism really is. So these different commitments are on the table, and my work is then to try to find out in what way are the different 56 member states implementing these commitments into their own national culture and political processes. And you should know then, because of the fact that we as OSCE cannot press these states, that although they have admitted these commitments, that they are in the process of implementation clear-cut. I only can name then what are they doing, in what way are they fulfilling, or in what way they are failing in order to implement these commitments. And for instance, the working definition on anti-Semitism is only put in place by a minority of these 56 member states. Some member states are ready to accept these principles, others are rejecting these principles, and others are reluctant to put them in place. Take the case of Holocaust education. We have delivered a book dealing with guidelines for the ministries of education in the respective different member states, in order to give them ideas how to create new educational systems, how to define curricula, how to give materials to the teachers so that they can use these materials into the classroom in order to bring to pupils and students a better understanding of what Holocaust really was. And in an overview, I saw that roughly 25% of the 56 member states were ready to implement these guidelines. Roughly 25% are objecting to do anything about it, and the others were shilly-shally, so to say. They are doing something, and some of them are more than reluctant. So this is then the picture of reality. You have to see that on the top level of the ministerial conferences, these OSCE member states are ready to create a kind of new formula. But then, if it comes to the real question, how to bring then these ideas through from the top level of the state leaders into the segments of government and then pouring into the segments of society and societies of these 56 member states, then there are remaining questions and some not only reluctance but kind of resistance to be seen in reality. So this is the situation we are facing. And if you look into the problems, where are these different countries located, then you will find out that especially when you go more to the east of the OSCE space, then you find reluctance and sometimes resistance. Especially if you go to the not EU countries, European Union countries, then you find out Central Asia, Russia, the Russian Federation, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova. These are countries, if you take a serious look what is going on inside these countries, that there are more questions to be seen than serious answers. Take the case of, I only would like to take Hungary as one of these cases. Hungary is a member of the European Union, and they worked actively to be a full-fledged member of the European Union and tried very hard to meet the criteria to be an acknowledged and recognized member of the European Union. And they made it. But after they stepped into the European Union, nowadays you will find out that there are some problems to be seen that you hope that they were not to be seen now. They sometimes made the kind of interpretation for us, Westerners, so to say, that these countries are ready to meet all the societal problems in which they are living. And now you see that they are going through a very difficult transformational process from former communist style system, political system, into a democratic-oriented system. And sometimes I do have the feeling that they try to bring about a kind of a lip service to us and to others who were the ones to decide whether these countries, especially Hungary, could get the full-fledged membership of the European Union. And then nowadays you will find out that these are countries struggling with the problems of transformation processes. One key point is, in this regard, that sometimes when societies and nation states are in a new phase of building up their own consciousness, and when consciousness of the old empire, the old regime, are fading away, communist style system, and you are not ready to create a new kind of foundation of this new political consciousness, then the right extremists do have a good possibility to fill this vacuum that you will find out when you switch over from one political system into a different one, into the next phase. And in this regard, if you have a kind of an old style right-wing and right extremist movement, then inherited in this movement are segments of neo-Nazi orientation. And nowadays you will see, if you go to Budapest, massive demonstrations, and you can see the symbols of the Nazi area that the people are showing in the street. Or take the case of Ukraine. There is one of these universities, MAUP, clear-cut anti-Semitic, clear-cut. And I talked to President Yushchenko on this point, and there is no doubt that the political leadership in these countries, Hungary and Ukraine, are against that kind of right extremist orientation, against a new build or a character of neo-Nazism, new recreated political class, but they are really strongly against this development. But there is this but. It's not only a good point and a good starting point in this development that the leadership is clear-cut. The real point is, what about the society? What about the inner conflicts in these societies? How are they met? And what kind of political instruments is the political class then using in order to convince the people and the population that democracy is at stake when right extremists are on the rise? And in the back of this, behind them, of these right extremist groups is anti-Semitism on the rise too. These are the challenges of the transformational situations in which these countries are living. Or take the case of Poland. There are, I don't know how many, but several hundreds or something Jews living in Poland. But there is a tremendous anti-Semitism to be seen. Symbols you can figure out if you go into a normal hotel in Warsaw. That there you can find symbols of anti-Semitism. You can buy there. There is a kind of a symbolized Jew to be seen. You can buy this symbol, in this size, and you can find out that he's looking like the YIISA in the German films of the 30s, with the same face. And these are problems to be seen all over the Eastern European countries. So in this regard, there are growing fears to be seen. And what I have seen, as you've pointed out, as a personal representative of the Channeling Office of the OSCE, that my experiences tell me that I do have mixed experiences. One is that The leadership of these countries are clear-cut against anti-Semitism, but on the other, there are growing problems to be seen. And how to meet these problems? I only would like to point out one example, talking about a different country, not Eastern European country, but Great Britain. In Great Britain, there has been established a 15 members group of the Westminster, of the lower house of the parliament, and made an inquiry and delivered a report on how to fight against anti-Semitism in Great Britain. And they delivered 35 very concrete recommendations in a lasting 11 months work. And in the end of these recommendations, now the government of the United Kingdom does now have a lot of more possibilities to act against anti-Semitism. So this is one of the best examples that I've seen. And these good examples I would like to universalize in the whole sphere, in the whole space of the OSCE. Because I'm convinced, and I do hope, that if you catch parliamentarians, members of the different national parliaments, in order to confront these problems, then there is a good possibility to build a bridge between the conviction of the state leaders and then to kind of bringing about this new attitude towards all the different segments of societies which are up to now reluctant in fighting against anti-Semitism. So in Great Britain, that was a wonderful experience. And for instance, in my country, in Germany, we do have a hearing in June 16 in order to try and find out what can we do better in Germany in order to fight against anti-Semitism. And the case of Germany is very interesting. Although in Germany anti-Semitism has begun in its most brutal form, and Holocaust has been invented, we do have, and the different surveys you can compare, roughly and at least 10% of the whole population in Germany who are anti-Semitic in its attitudes. And this is since the first survey has been delivered since the early 80s till today. Roughly the same figure. And sometimes these figures are higher than 10%. For instance, dealing with the last Israeli Hezbollah war, then we have found a peak of more than 15% anti-Semitic attitudes. So, although I do think so that in Germany there is a full awareness that we have to fight from the beginning on against anti-Semitism, there is still this hardcore attitude towards Jews. And lastly, if you go into different countries all over the OSCE sphere, then you will find out that there is a new form of anti-Semitism to be registered, to be seen on the spot. The old form is anti-Judaism, rooted into long, old forms of traditional attitudes towards Jews. originating from Christian ideology. Nowadays, if you go to different regions in immigrant societies all over Europe, take the case of Great Britain, Pakistani-oriented Muslim communities, or go to France, Muslim orientation mostly coming from the Maghreb, from North Africa, or go to Germany. Most of them, these Muslim immigrants, are coming from Turkey. Different types of Muslim orientation. In the case of Turkey, there is a secular state, and then you will find out that in these new segments of societies where immigrants are strong, they are related in the third and the fourth generation to where? To Almana, to some television sources coming from the Near East, from Egypt or other places where the Elders of Zion plays a significant role. So these two new forms are intermingling each other, and in this regard are really dangerous to be seen. So what is my hope? My hope is that if you can understand better these new forms and types of anti-Semitism, then you can fight better against these forms. So knowledge is one thing, but the key is not only knowledge, the key is education. And if you have in mind that education has to do with creating attitudes for the younger ones, so that they are aware of the fact what is going on in the street or in the bus or wherever, in the sport field, wherever they are experiencing or facing the problem that whoever is representing a minority and he is attacked by some other who feels that he is the or she is the majority representing, then he has to stand up, he has to speak out, he has to fight against from the beginning. And in this regard, our guidelines are telling teachers and the younger generation that we have to create these kind of democratic-oriented values. And in this regard, I do really hope, that there are not only mixed experiences, there are not only growing fears, which I felt after these years, but there are possibilities to act against, and these are hopes to be seen. And in the OSCE world, we are trying to do our best, although, as you have heard, the tools are weak. But the consciousness of the people I've seen are more lively than I thought of in the beginning. And in this regard, I do think that hope in the end will be stronger than the problems we are facing. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So we have a few questions now. Anybody like to start off? Yeah.
Yes, I have a question about your hope for education as the ultimate solution. It seems to me that, and I'm thinking in particular about the anti-Semitism in the immigrant communities in Europe, the second type that you spoke about. I'm right now in the middle of Ayaan Hirsi Ali's book about her experiences growing up in Somalia and in Nairobi, and that I'm getting the impression from that book and from many other sources that the hatred of Jews is so much, and the demonization of Jews is so much a part of so many Muslim cultures. Even when there are no Jews present whatsoever in those cultures, that when these immigrant communities come to Europe, they are bringing with them a long heritage of hostility towards Jews. And it seems to me that to re-educate and to re-socialize them requires getting them to give up a very large segment of the culture that they're bringing with them. That it's not simply a matter of exposing them to a Holocaust education program in a European school system. It's not simply a matter of exposing them to somebody talking about how bigotry is bad or presenting them with data about Jews, but rather getting them to part with something which is very much part of their essence, which is the culture they're bringing with them. That would require a major effort of re-socialization, a major effort of almost reprogramming. And I'm wondering, given the weak tools that you have, what hope is there for doing that?
Well, my hope is that these people can get the message. And that means that they can understand what is really going on. We have, our work is at least twofold. First is to improve the process of integration for these alienated people. Because if they do still have the experience that in the reality they do not have equal rights, and this is the case in Europe, then they do seek a kind of excuse and trying to find out a scapegoat. And you know, historically, who was the scapegoat. And this is one thing, to improve the societal processes of integration. And judging this problem, you will find out that most of the Western European countries are now being aware of the fact that they have to do more than they did in the past in order to create these integrational processes. That's one thing. And the other, interlinked with this process, we have to convince the younger generations of Muslims that if they would like to live in our countries, they have to, I would put it, not only re-socialized, but to civilize themselves in a way that they are ready to share with us the common view that has been emerging since the end of Second World War, that we need each other irrespectively where we are coming from. If you are a Jew or not, a Christian or I don't know what, we have to live together and we have to share our common values. And this is what you're talking about, kind of, yes, re-education, but it's even more than that. It's to understand that we only can live in common when we share our values here in our space. So these two processes we have to link to each other, and this is a tremendous task that we are facing.
I wonder what you thought of Sarkozy's original plan for Holocaust education to match each French child with a Jewish child who perished in the Holocaust.
I do think that this is a wonderful idea. The only question is remaining, at what age can you do this? There is a debate in France when you can start this. But this is a wonderful idea. And you should know that in France, earlier, and in Germany, for instance, the states, we are financing, having meetings with Jewish students. Not only in Germany or in France, but for instance in Auschwitz. So this is one of the key elements of our programs, so that the younger ones can have a chance to understand the other, and then to recognize that he or she, the other, is roughly than I am. There is no real difference between us.
Professor, I would like your comment, similar to what the gentleman in the back talked about, the education. I myself, I was born in Hungary, naturalized, and came here in early 41, very luckily, and naturalized. And we lost our family, so I can testify to the Holocaust. My question to you is, if you take away the violence and feeling in Arab states about the territorial claims of Israel and the anti-Semitism which is focused upon property in the Palestinian problem and Israel itself, and then you take away the threats that over the course of the Middle Ages that you had religious opposition to the Jews as being the ones in the Catholic Church until Vatican II was involved in that direction. Sartre in his book and others have tried to come to grips with what is the real core. You take a country like Hungary or Poland, where there's not a territorial concern about losing property. There's not a religious concern anymore. But there's this, in Hungary, innate hatred of Jews, which are exhibited in a recent movie I saw, which is called The Counterfeiters. And if you see that, it's a German movie.
Yeah.
It's about Jews that were sent to Sachsenhausen, that camp, in order that they could promote the counterfeiting of the Bank of England pound to break the bank. And they were treated there, and the word is vermin. The intense hatred. I could never, having gone through good educations with all people in the United States where there is anti-Semitism, but it's not the kind of hatred that you just described to us in Poland and in Hungary in the streets. Now, in terms of that kind of education, with the leaders of those countries, Ukraine, Poland, Hungary, saying, well, we're against it, what is the real core problem that tends to persist if you remove the anger over property, anger over Palestine, and anger over Christ and the religion? What is the core of this issue, really? And it's a mystery to me.
I only can give you my personal...
Yes, I would like to hear it.
Yes. Judgment, it's not a judgment, but only kind of reflection. In my personal understanding, there is a deep-rooted religious problem between Jews and Christians, especially if you go to Orthodox churches, more than to Catholic or Protestant churches.
You Russian Eastern Orthodox?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons, in my understanding. And I have to say, and I have to regret, that the new Pope reinvented a prayer, as you probably have read, on Easter, dealing with the role of Jews. And I do hope that these days when he is here, he will get the message that he has to reform this step backwards. The Vatican, in the 70s, the conciliatory process had decided to leave this behind.
Yes.
But Benedict brought it back.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So this is a dangerous, real dangerous prayer.
Hmm.
Friday Easter, where in this prayer the role of Jews were coming again to the forefront. And then you know what one of the problems is. And in this regard, I do hope that Pope Benedict is coming back to the Polish Pope. He was, in this regard, a real friend of Jews, because he grew up, as you know, nearby Auschwitz. And he personally witnessed what has happened in this death camp. And he was, although he was a traditionalist in some regard, he was clear-cut towards Jews. And Benedict, and I must say, although he is a German, he should know what he's doing in this regard. And he should immediately come back to the prayer that has been inaugurated in the 70s.
Do you think, Professor, in countries like Hungary and Poland, Ukraine, which had the anti-Semitism after Pope John XXIII and Vatican II rolled back that mention of the Jews, that hatred is religious-based? Is that?
And that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
I just want to point out something, and then I will have a question about it. The new anti-Semitism that is mentioned occasionally is relatively a new product, but essentially it is the old Christian anti-Semitism, which was picked up by the Arabs, especially by the Islamic leadership of the Arab world, already at the beginning of the 20s, of the previous century.
Egypt.
It's important to note that the forefront, the leadership for the anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist came not from political circles.
No.
It came from the religious.
Yes.
I mean, the whole objection to the Jews establishing themselves as independent people came from the religious point of view. The average person had no political inclination to deal with it one way or another. Essentially, nothing much changed. Even the leadership of the Palestinian movement, although it dressed itself as a political body, basically they had followed exactly the same pattern and the same characteristics that were established by the Mufti and other religious leaders. Now, what had happened in the last, I don't know, I can't pinpoint the exact time when it started, that that leadership, that is Muslim leadership, realized that they could take the Christian manufactured anti-Semitism, repackage it, and deliver it back to Europe. Now they are basically selling back to Europe the same merchandise that they took from Europe, because there was no anti-Semitism in the Islamic world before the 19th century, or the beginning of the 20th century, to be more correct. And it was picked up from Europe by the first Arabs who went to Europe for their higher education. And that's what one of the things that they brought back with them.
Yeah.
Now, this is now being spread all over Europe, especially. Given the democratic system in Europe, what do you think can be done in order to subvert this movement before it becomes worse, especially when we remember that the democratic system failed to subdue the Nazi movement. Now, you had a lesson, your experience. It's nice to be democratic, it's nice to maintain free speech, but it's stupid to commit suicide. So what can be considered?
Yeah, that's the main and crucial question. Then you have to figure out that we do have different forms of democracies in Germany. Take the case of France. France is based on laïcité, a secular state, and the state has not the right to judge on religious things. In this regard, Sarkozy is in a not that very comfortable situation. So the state has no right to intervene directly into religious matters. Take the case of, say, Germany. There is a kind of cooperation between the state and the churches. And in this regard, cooperation between the state and Muslim communities. We can, if necessary, create rules, not laws, but rules they have to commit and accept. This is the case for Germany. So the point is, what I'm trying to say is that there is not a clear-cut common answer of this problem you described correctly, but different answers within the European Union, because the nation-state have differences. So, what to do then? Again, I would make the point again that it is necessary to strengthen the processes of integration and to give all the members of the society, wherever they are coming from Muslim orientation, Christian orientation, to give them the possibility to cooperate to each other, so that this kind of cooperation leads to better understanding that if you're a Jew or Muslim, that this is not a point of difference, but we all are individuals, we all are members of the same society, and we have to stick to the rules of the society. If there are problems to be seen, conflicts, then we should try to work out kind of formulas how we are acting in these conflicts. And the most, so to say, regulatory law, so to say, or rule is that we have to act peacefully, although there are problems to be solved. And not only problems, but conflicts to be seen. So, in this regard, again, I do hope that this kind of civilizational process is now being enhanced by looking into the different problems of our societies. But you are right in saying nobody knows the outcome of this. And if necessary, the state has to be strong in order not to be destroyed again, as we have witnessed in the end or the beginning of the 30s of the last century.
So I'm going to ask a question, you will ask the second question. So you in a sense focused on the internal societal issues of anti-Semitism within the OECD or within the European Union. So I want to challenge you to look to external or foreign affairs, which you're an expert of. In Article 3 of the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, Article 3 stipulates very clearly and simply that incitement to genocide is against the Convention. Ahmadinejad, I think anybody who looks at what he's been saying over the last several years consistently and clearly is inciting to genocide based on what the Convention's definition is. What is the OECD's responsibility internationally to this phenomenon? One. And two, given the European Union in general and Germany specifically, given the threat of another Holocaust, and I'm choosing my words very deliberately and carefully, what should be the reaction, what can be the reaction of Europe, of Germany, to stop this disaster in the making?
Number one, the OSCE has no tool available against this. The only thing what we can do is have a debate on this and speaking out, and this has been done. Secondly, what can the European Union do? As you know, we are in the process of negotiating, and the United States of America, plus Russia, plus China, plus then the EU3, that's France, that's Great Britain and Germany, we are in the same boat, so to say, acting against Iran. And you know that the Security Council delivered several measures in order to strengthen the process of boycott. But if this is not enough, then Sarkozy made the proposal to enhance this process of boycotting. And if Ahmadinejad is not ready to meet the challenges and the questions that we have put to him, then we should use different new measures. And the European Union would be ready to deliver. This is in the process now of debating in the different member states, and I don't know when the time will come, but we are in a heat debate on this. There are different member states who are not opposing to this, but reluctant to new boycotts, because they argue the United States of America has been putting in place boycotts, and what was the outcome? So this is the question that they are now bringing forward. But again, we are debating this, and if necessary, we are ready to make it much more precise and painful, especially for the political elite of this country in Iran. And if necessary, if, for instance, Israel comes to the conclusion that that kind of measures are not helpful, then Israel is free to act. And if necessary, then especially Germany, we have been debating on this since several months, then we are someone to support, if necessary.
So just to follow up quickly, do you think the European Union or members of the European Union would engage in something more substantial than sanctions? Would they engage in military action if it became apparent that there was an existential, real danger to the future of Israel?
If Israel is the one to decide on this, and that's an autonomous government, then I don't see any objection if this is needed.
You?
I'm still absorbing your answer to that. You don't, I mean, I hear you saying that you don't have an objection, but I'm wondering if that my observation of Europe's behavior with regard to Israel is that it's been a very mixed level of support, even when Israel behaves very cautiously. And I'm just wondering if Israel were going to act, how confident are you that if Israel were going to act under circumstances like that the support would really be there?
Well,
Not your opinion now, but your prediction of how Europe would deal with it.
yeah, as always, when Israel is acting, there is then debate in several countries. But take the case of the Lebanon war. There was no real critique against Israel to be seen. Some journalists wrote some critical articles, yes. But for instance, in the Bundestag, the German government were supporting, and we gave Israel what Israel wanted to have. Not only submarines, we are the ones to deliver submarines, but the German Bundeswehr, the German army is in place there to strengthen UNIFIL 2, the second new mandate. Only take this point if necessary, and if Israel comes to the conclusion they have to act, then it's Israel to do that, and there will be, in my personal opinion, yes, there will be debates then, but no objection to this, if necessary, military option.
Anybody else? Okay, so that's it. So, on behalf of YIISA, I'm grateful for you to come all the way here to join us, and it was really an honor to have you.
Thank you, and all the best.
You too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.